Welcome, everyone, to RotoWire Fantasy Sports today, obviously, or I guess the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm already doing my SiriusXM bit.
The XM.
Yeah, I'm ready to go, Jake. I'm all ready to go. I mean, we have training camp now starting live for a lot of people. We got plenty of news, actually, shockingly, for today that's happened over the past couple hours, I'm sure. As more people and players and teams report to training camp, there might be more information that trickles out, but still plenty more to talk about. It's also going to be, I think, an interesting theme for a lot of people. We have identified 10 late-round sleepers, guys that you can invest with one of your last picks, that type of deal, from a value perspective, too. So lots and lots to cover for today's show. Let's go ahead and hit it. Again, welcome everyone to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Joe Bartley. You can follow me at JB Fantasy Sports on Twitter. Alongside me every Tuesday moving forward is Jake Letarski. You can follow him at RotoJake. I guess not on Twitter. It's on X now, right? You can follow us on X, and that's not a weird drug thing that we get to do, so that's cool.
The domain name still says Twitter.com until that changes, until it's X.com, and they compete with all the adult sites. We're going to call it Twitter.com.
Okay, I'm glad we have that clarification.
Let's get that out of the way right here.
Like I said, plenty of news that has already occurred over the past couple hours of teams have reported the training camp. We also have 10 late round flyers, sleeper candidates, whoever you want to talk about. We got people in the chat already mentioning their favorite flyers too. I'm loving it. Some Luke Schoonmaker talk. How dare they disrespect our Jake Ferguson, our UW-Madison boy over at the Cowboys. But lots there to uncover, or at least to go over. We have position by position. Excited for all that. Before we dive in, let's get a word from our sponsor, Circus Sports. Get ready for more millions guaranteed. It's the biggest pro football contest in Vegas, and they're back and bigger than ever with $14 million in guaranteed prizes only at Circus Sports. Enter Nevada, play from anywhere. There's 2 ways to win and no rake. You play Circa Million and make 5 picks against the spread each week with 100% payback to players. The grand finale winner takes home $1 million. Last place takes home a $100,000 booby prize with quarterly and full season payouts as well. $6 million in guaranteed prizes. Join Circus Survivor to select one team each week straight up with no repeat selections. If the team loses or ties, the entry is eliminated. Each team can only be picked once in the season. You can go 20-0 or 0-20 and be the last person standing in either one. $8 million guaranteed prizes across all those. $14 million in guaranteed total. Visit circusports.com for more details. All right, I have mentioned it, Jake. Lots of different.
You said booby prize. I'm sorry, I can't get over.
Well, isn't it? I mean, that's right. It's not a Bobby prize. I always have to correct myself because my brain says no.
No, last place. Yeah, I get it. But that's awesome. I think when I think of Vegas and I think of that, I'm thinking something totally different.
Ah, yes, I see. We still have your gutter left there from two weeks ago when we were on the RotoWire Vegas retreat in Circus Sports, which was awesome. But I mentioned we had news already occur today.
Absolutely.
Really early in the morning, Saquon Barkley signs a 1-year deal with the Giants. I'm not sure if we've seen the reports yet as to what will happen next year, and I think that's kind of most important if you're playing Dynasty or Keeper League formats. Because there's all these the shoddy reporting out there saying, hey, well, he could still do a franchise tag. He could still get franchise tagged even if this deal didn't happen. We saw it with Kirk Cousins, right? Respectfully, he had 2 separate franchise tags, couldn't have the third, and that's when he ends with the Vikings. Saquon Barkley could have still gotten franchise tag next year, and it would have been like an $18 million or whatever, like 25% of the previous one was.
Yeah.
I don't really care about the semantics of his current deal that we have. I think it was just over $1 million more than what the franchise tag was offered to running backs this season.
And he has to earn it in incentives. Basically, it sets up for this entire scenario to just play out again next year, right? They're going to want a franchise tag him. He's not going to want a franchise tag, but at least this buys him some time. If he doesn't perform well, the team has more leverage. If he hits all of these incentives, which I think the incentives are to get an extra one, basically it's the franchise tag, and then he can earn $1 million if he gets 1,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, 65 receptions. He got the yards and the touchdowns last year, just shy on the receptions. So, I mean, I guess good for him. This still seems like the team won, right? Because you're basically franchise tagging him, and if you have to pay out the incentives, that means he had a good year, right? And, I tie this back to the Saquon Barkley versus Jonathan Taylor debate, the 4.5 ADP. I think Saquon's going to pass him in ADP now. There's some –
I would agree.
Now that there's certainty there. I also think that, the worry I had before was, What if he plays on the franchise tag and just dogs it or gets a fake injury? That's not going to happen now because he'll want his $1 million. So yeah, I bumped Saquon up to RB4 at this point. I don't know. I'm still a little shaky on BJ, and I'm not quite sold there. So things are going to get real interesting in those top three.
Well, it's compelling. We talked about last week, both Nick Chubb and Jonathan Taylor we liked a lot. I'll still take Nick Chubb over Saquon Barkley. Obviously, the ADP says you don't have to. I bet you Barkley climbs in that late first-round category, whereas Nick Chubb is still, if he is the last first-round pick, fine, but typically 14, 15, 16. It's Jonathan Taylor, who's a little bit, it's ambiguous situation. He was part of that infamous running back meeting group that they had on Zoom or wherever it was this past week where they talked about their contracts. And clearly the powers that be decided, well, let's just cave, right? Because Barkley ends up signing that deal shortly after. We'll see what happens with Josh Jacobs. Tony Pollard wasn't included in that conversation for funny reasons.
Barkley must have himself a hell of an insurance policy because if he blows a knee out for the second time, his career's done and he never touches that multi-year deal. So, it's just tough. It seems like an ownership one situation here. Running backs continue to lose, but
I did see I did see a report that Barkley is already set to make $7 million in sponsorships this year, and like maybe there's that New York market that can help with the sponsorships more so. And obviously, you're not making that money if you're not playing, so it's a twofold thing. But I would agree with you. It sets the stage for the same conversation to occur next year. So that was one bit of news. We had plenty more occur throughout the day. I guess I'll go order importance, not our sheet here, Jake. Yeah. Kadarius Toney had surgery to clean up a knee injury. He's expected to miss most of training camp. The report is he could, and I'm putting this in parentheses for the non-viewer group, he could be ready for week 1. Boy, given Kadarius Toney's status throughout his career thus far, that he has another surgery and that there's more ambiguous timeframes, this is a pretty brutal blow for a receiver that's being drafted first 7-8 rounds, much like Treylon Burks, who also got really impacted the DeAndre Hopkins signing just this past Sunday.
Yeah, it's amazing how the Chiefs offense comes together here. And, of course, when you have to pay Mahomes that kind of contract, you're not able to afford the super high-priced, flashy receiver talent here. I mean, that depth chart is Kadarius Toney, Valdez-Scantling, Sky Moore, Rashee Rice. We know what Valdez-Scantling is, kind of a glorified deep threat at best. He's never going to be a guy that consistently moves the chains. Sky Moore disappointed, considerably early on, and now Rashee Rice is interesting. I mean, all this really does for me, I was staying away from Toney at that ADP anyway. If it wasn't this injury, it was going to be the next injury, and now we're already talking about him missing could be back for week 1. That doesn't sound super optimistic here, He steps off the bus wrong, and he's, could be back by week 4 now. So, I'm not buying it at this point. If anything, it feeds more into the Dick Kelsey number 1 overall argument because he's going to eat again. He's going to eat, and I wasn't taking Toney before. I'm definitely not taking him now because even the discount that he's going to get is going to be still too steep a price for my blood.
Yeah, I'm not considering it either. You mentioned one of our top 10 sleepers. We've had more come in the chat. Khalil Shakir, somebody mentioned Devin Achane, again, the rookie running back for the Dolphins, and Dalvin Cook is yet to sign. Maybe that's an interesting one, too. We're going to get to our list of 10 sleeper late round-ish selections a little bit later in the show, just going through a bit more of the news that happened thus far today. We had Michael Thomas. I feel like we get a yearly report around this time, Jake. End of July, early August, saying, hey, he's good to go. He's healthy. This with Michael Thomas's toe injury. He's set to practice for the Saints. The same goes for Juju Smith-Schuster now on his new team. He's good to go with his knee injury. I think both were expected. Worth pointing out, I forget the blanking on the Saints main beat writer, but doesn't actually, he has his own site now. Nick Underhill, I think is his name, has been adamantly like every sort of banner type of statement you can make saying, I will take Michael Thomas in fantasy football this year. I'm not sure how much Nick Underhill is playing fantasy or if he's aware of where Michael Thomas is ADP, but he has been pounding the drums and then some. So it's interesting. I mean, we've had, I think, 3 consecutive seasons where, you could maybe consider Michael Thomas in this range, but theoretically, this is the best the offense has been post Drew Brees now with Derek Carr as your starting quarterback. They have Chris Olave, who I like a lot as well, too. Any interest in Michael Thomas in fantasy this year?
Yeah, I mean, the interest is mild, and the interest, I would say, is rising. He's still 30 years old, and if he is actually healthy here, he's got some of the best hands in the game, running some of the best routes in the game. We forget that he was the number 1 fantasy player, not all that long ago. So, my interest is growing. I got burned by him last year. Burned by him, probably the year before, too. It's been but I mean, early on in the year, I mean, I'm looking at last year's game log. He scored 3 times in the first 2 games, 5, 6, and 5 receptions. So there's something in there in the tank here, and I think I would say sure maybe Derek Carr gives him a little bit better chance to succeed than if they were rolling in with Jameis Winston.
Okay, you have Chase Claypool for the Bears now coming off the PUP list, is expected to practice Wednesday. I mean, it's Justin Fields, who you say what you want as a runner.
There's no wide receiver 3 in that.
Yeah, offense. I mean, Darnell Mooney also got cleared too, which I think actually hurts the Claypool part more. But if one of those guys were to go down, I think the other benefits. I actually drafted Mooney in the RotoWire Vegas draft as like a 10th or 11th round selection. It's a full point PPR thing, and that's where I have Mooney a bit more valuable. But we're not too far off of when Claypool had 10 plus touchdowns for the Steelers. Like he has that athleticism if he's used correctly. I just have concerns the Bears offense can actually utilize him correctly.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, what Claypool's done since then, you know, it makes that 10 touchdown thing look more and more fluky every single year that goes by.
Yeah, it smells a little bit like Robert Tonyan for the Packers that one year, a little bit like that. So. Amari Cooper is not going to be practicing yet with an undisclosed injury. Oh my God, undisclosed injury. Typically, when that happens, when there isn't information disclosed, it's not serious, right? Because if it was, reporters would find a way. But just worth noting, given his ADP as kind of the 3rd, 4th round wide receiver, and optimism with now 1 year of Deshaun Watson in the practice regimen for the Browns. Theoretically, that offense should improve. We've talked about Nick Chubb plenty as well. Amari Cooper is going to be a big part of the Browns overall operating as expected. And the other part, or other one to mention, Jimmy Graham signed a contract with the Saints. I had to literally do a double take, Jake. I thought when you put that in the spreadsheet, you were just like joking, like this was like a fake thing. Yep. Nope. Jimmy Graham, 36-year-old Jimmy Graham of like 5 years ago, actually being fantasy relevant, signed a contract with the Saints, who already have Foster Moreau, have Juwan Johnson, who a lot of people like, have Taysom Hill, who does weird stuff, technically qualifies as a tight end for fantasy purposes. I would be sooner expecting that to be a 1-day retirement signing than he actually be factoring this season.
Yeah. And then I was like, oh, and Antonio Gates signed with the Chargers, and Jeremy Shockey signed with the Giants, right?
Yeah, exactly. Not likely for that to occur. So just a bit of news and notes that have occurred, of course, today, and obviously more information will trickle out as teams report to training camp. Let's stop for a second, Jake, get a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire, before we dive into some of our favorite late round spots, again, at quarterbacks here in just a second. All right, we're back and talking about our late round flyer picks, whatever. I want to be clear to the audience and to you, Jake, that when we were first tossing this idea around, late round to me meant like 7th round running back or 13th QB or 13th round QB. Like I wasn't thinking literally if we're doing a best ball or underdog, it's like 18th round. I wasn't thinking along those lines. So I had to change my trajectory on the answers a little bit. That's going to matter for running backs somewhat, but just understand, for me, the answer to this question is a lot of a philosophical, how I'm structuring the team, what I want it to look like. You're going to hear this repeatedly, Jake. I know the audience who was listening throughout the offseason with me and Jim Coventry have heard it plenty before. I will be taking a quarterback within the first 6 rounds. I will be taking a quarterback among that first 7. So I don't really need late round QBs. They're not of interest to me. And I think they all are kind of the same. But to play out this exercise, I did pick a few guys that I thought could maybe exceed their expectation to get to be top 12 quarterback status. I want to talk about your guy first, though, because he's technically not even starting, and yet I like the idea of him being a true sleeper.
Yeah, so we'll do this by position like we plan to do when we get to our waiver wire show later this year. So we'll start out with some quarterbacks, and I know that you like to, your whole philosophy was to do an early on quarterback. And this is one of those things that for me, okay, after the Super Bowl's done, I have to dial into college basketball a little bit. And then I'll be honest, I take a little bit of a month or 2 break from, from the football news cycle. And this is one of those picks that made taking that break from the news cycle seem worth it, because I come in now at the end of July in a fresh perspective, and I see Mr. TED Talks has spoiled the guy I'm about to discuss. I come in now at the end of July with a fresh perspective, and I look at all the 49ers news, and I look at our 49ers depth chart, and I'm like, wait a minute. Brock Purdy is the starter, and Sam Darnold is listed on there. We have, maybe that could be up for debate. And then Trey Lance is number 3. And I'm like, So what the heck happened here? What happened to the guy that the 49ers used multiple first-round assets to move up and require? What happened to the guy that was, what did I have it here, QB 12, top 100 overall in ADP last season? And that was when he wasn't even starting, mind you. That was pretty much Jimmy Garoppolo starting off the season, Where did all that hype go? I don't know what happened to all that hype. Yes, he broke his leg. He broke his leg in week 2. Brock Purdy tore his UCL and had Tommy John after the playoffs, right? So Lance is going to get a lot of those reps early on where Purdy sits out spring practice. We'll see what he's available and doing and throwing here. And, I guess, even before Lance had that finger thing that may have affected his accuracy a little bit. Sure, if you want to concede that Brock Purdy is a more accurate passer than Trey Lance, that is absolutely fine. But I think every other aspect of the game and physical talent, Trey Lance has enough to win this job. Yes, it's odd to me that they paid Sam Darnold $4.5 million to be a backup third string, but maybe that's just overreacting to last year having to go to their backup third string situation here. I just don't understand why Trey Lance is sitting all the way down at QB 33, 243 overall. I took him as my third quarterback in Scott Fishbowl, knowing that it would take a little while longer, for him to maybe develop or win that job. Or guess what? Maybe what happens to that ADP if he's taking every first team rep in camp and is starting preseason and sits the last preseason game here? What happens to that ADP then? Does it literally cut in half? Right now in late July, you can get him at QB 33, and I think
free. You could literally get him free.
He is nothing. So you take him as the last pick in your draft, and guess what? If it doesn't turn out that way, you drop him and pick up Derek Carr the week before the start of the season. You drop him and pick up any number of guys, Sam Howell even, whatever. So there's no risk here, and the potential for growth is just absolutely amazing. And do I need to mention his offense is absolutely stacked, right? They have McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell's around, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, hell of a 1-2, George Kittle. This team is incredibly stacked. I don't know what happened to all that hype. If you were a fan of his hype, maybe you got burned last year. You can't overreact to that. You got to come right back to the well. Otherwise, you're going to miss this whole idea of Trey Lance coming to fruition. So,
let's give some context.
Long shot, free quarterback. That's the guy.
Let's give some context, dude. So Brock Purdy obviously has the Tommy John injury during that playoff loss to the Eagles. Evidently, throwing the football isn't as tenuous as throwing a baseball, because when you hear Tommy John surgery for baseball, that guy's out almost 2 years, right? It's instantaneous. But we had reports all the way back in March saying, no, I think Brock Purdy's going to be ready for training camp. You're like, what? How is that possible as somebody that knows both football and baseball? But that continued throughout June and July. And the Sam Darnold signing is what it is. But now we've gotten to the point in the offseason where the 49ers brass, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, are saying Purdy is going to be the starter week 1. We're expecting he's going to be healthy. There's no situation where he wouldn't be, which seems too aggressive when you think about having the number 3 overall pick in Trey Lance and the trade that they did to acquire him. But if they think Purdy's going to be healthy, I don't. I just truly, I can't fathom that. If they think Purdy's going to be healthy, I guess what he did over that final 2 months of the season probably makes him the number 1 starter. Trey Lance is a really good athlete, but if Kyle Shanahan's going to just put him in a spot where he gets injured, then sure. I don't see a scenario where he makes it through. This is now 2 consecutive seasons in which Trey Lance has had a season-ending injury because Kyle Shanahan's done dumb stuff with him. I believe at one point the 49ers are going to go to Trey Lance because Brock Purdy is going to be not very good or ineffective. We're going to find out he really was just being a pumpkin in a Cinderella season, Cinderella 2 months or whatever it is. But I'm not sure Trey Lance is that guy right now. And this is coming from somebody who took him in the Superflex draft at RotoWire, the Vegas draft, as my last selection. I think it doesn't hurt because it is your last selection.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to see the dividends pay off. And actually, I kind of feel like where we were having Justin Fields conversations midpoint last season on the Free Agent Waiver Wire podcast because he was under 30% rostered. He just sucked for those first 2 months. I could see a similar scenario occurring with Trey Lance. I bet you by end of season, he's playing for fantasy lineups. But I'm not sure beginning of the season he is.
No, that's fair. Yeah, then that's actually the best argument against this, right? The best argument against drafting Trey Lance is that, you can just pick him up in week 6, 7, or 8, right? And that's what I see. You talk about 49ers brass kind of giving those hints toward Purdy. I'm looking through all our player news. I mean, we have hints from John Lynch in May that Purdy will be the favorite to start once he's healthy. We also have quotes from Kyle Shanahan that say he is, quote, the best we've seen him right now, in referring to Trey Lance. When you watch Lance's feet, his timing, his throwing the ball, he's such a better place now than he was last year at this time. So there's praise coming all around, and I think there could be a little bit of gamesmanship here. So yeah, maybe not the start of the season, maybe not. But
how about damning praise by Nick Bosa, who had a tweet or a comment yesterday that said Justin Fields is the best running quarterback I've ever seen. That should be insulting to Trey Lance. How dare that happen?
Yeah, exactly. You just needed some bulletin board material from his own team, right?
From his own teammate, yeah.
Okay, but that's enough on Trey Lance. I mean, you guys get the picture, right? Everyone seemed to forget who he was and what he was going to be. Suddenly he's injured. Mr. Irrelevant, literally the last pick in the draft, comes in, has a nice little run, and now it's not the guy they traded all that draft capital for. Okay, I'm not quite believing that yet.
Obviously, we're trying to go 10 late-round sleepers, and we've talked about my quarterback decisions and at least trying to avoid those. I'm cheating by throwing like 3 guys into the same bucket to fit our 10. So these are bonus quarterbacks for you. We actually had a couple already mentioned in the chat. Uncle Ted Talks had said Jordan Love. Yes, he's among my group of sleepers right now. He's ADP of 156 on recent NFFC drafts, quarterback 20. I also like Derek Carr, who I took in the 4th round of a Superflex league that we did again at Vegas. He's quarterback 19, ADP of 156. And I'll also throw in Sam Howell too. The theme between Carr and Howell is that they're, I think, decent quarterbacks. We all talk about Brock Purdy and how he was able to emerge. At one point in his college football career, he was being talked about as a possible first-round selection. What everyone seems to forget is, so was Sam Howell, and he was a 5th-round pick last year, started that final game of the season. I didn't think looked bad. He's got Terry McLaurin, obviously Jahan Dotson. I think that offense overall, especially with the new Chiefs offensive coordinator, kind of making things a bit better with the talent they have, is going to be good. So I like Sam Howell and Derek Carr if you really are targeting a quarterback too. And Jordan Love, it's just the unknown. Like, I think the scheme fit might be good enough with Matt LaFleur, and sure, he's not doing Aaron Rodgers numbers, although you and I as Packer fans really hope that's the case.
Yeah, exactly.
I still, like at quarterback 20, there's no downside.
We believe in the offense's ability to be productive, right? We know Christian Watson can be very, very good. We know another receiver on that team can be sneaky, very, very good that we'll talk about later. And, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, they'll be productive, and that's why I believe that Jordan Love can. I'm with you on all of these guys. Jordan Love and Derek Carr is QB2. Sam Howell, your deep best ball candidates. That's where you're looking at him now. Or Howell, very similar to Lance, is free, and he could be the guy that you just pick up after a couple of good weeks too.
Yeah, again, we're doing this end of July. I think a lot of people listening are probably preparing best ball lineups, and I think Sam Howell, Jordan Love, Derek Carr are probably best suited for those. I'm not saying go ahead and trot one of them out as your QB1 if you're planning for like a redraft league, like a regular format, but certainly as QB2s in Superflex or best ball formats, I think they are interesting values nevertheless. Before we transition to the running back section, I want to get a word from our sponsors, Reality Sports Online. By now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the most powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to get to see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap function, much, much, much more. If that sounds complicated to you, it's not. Because the best thing about Reality Sports Online fantasy front office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league, and it just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test out your general manager skills for free in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use the promo code RotoWire, R-O-T-O-WIRE, to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. All right, we have plenty of different sleeper running backs flooding into the chat. Uncle Ted Talks had mentioned Roschon Johnson. We had the Samaje Perine, who every smart fantasy analyst is talking about. Charbonnet, I took him in round 10 in our Vegas draft a little while ago. Chuba Hubbard, again, I mentioned Devin A-Chain, stuff like that. I'm happy to say that our sleepers actually aren't among that group. Like, we went even deeper in our sleeper list than that. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. I'm not quite really positive. But what I had said at the beginning of the show, Jake, just to be clear, I really like an Elijah Mitchell in round 7 or 8. I think he's going to be totally fine value, even with Christian McCaffrey there. And if McCaffrey were to get hurt, you're talking about a guy that pretty much guaranteed 1,000 rushing yards and whatever else as a pass catcher. I like Breece Hall as a third-round guy. He just was cleared a little while ago. He should be good to go for training camp. Say what you want about the ACL tear, stuff like that. I think with Aaron Rodgers as QB, that's great value. Same with DeAndre Swift now with the Eagles, and I think he'll win out over Rashad Penny. But none of those guys actually qualify for late-round targets. And so even if I like them, they're not guys that I would ever say, oh, yeah, you'll be able to get them late round. Like that.
We could do a whole show on Breece Hall and talking about the history of comebacks from ACL injuries.
You're saying you're not.
I'm saying I'm closer to the Allen point of view than the Joe point of view.
Allen is a long-suffering Jets fan, so I think he is right to be pessimistic about what's going to happen with Breece Hall. But like Tank Bigsby was also mentioned. These are all really great names. I think the trio of running backs that we have are probably the only trio of late-round guys that I would target, which is to say I'm almost always getting my running back 4 or 3 by round 10. Because I'm not liking a lot of the depth that happens afterwards. And depth is a relative term because we're all kind of rolling the dice in these players. But for example, Chase Brown, who you like, I like a lot as well too. You have to really convince yourself that this is going to be the right situation. And it's a lot like Alexander Madison in past years. Well, if Dalvin Cook got hurt, Madison's going to be a starter. The same concept applies to Chase Brown.
Yeah, so this whole segment, we could talk about like if you're late round flyers for running backs, but we could also call it if you're trying 0 RB, if you're drafted 0 RB. One of the pinnacle or the pillars of that whole strategy, that whole draft strategy, is to take guys that are one break away from an opportunity, and maybe even not one break away from the opportunity, because Chase Brown is my selection for this case. Right now, he's running back 54. His ADP is 163 overall. Now, I don't hate Joe Mixon by any means. He's not on my don't draft list, or, we always thought we never have don't draft lists, but he's someone that I'm open to drafting. He's only 27 years old, but this is his 7th NFL season. So let's face it, he's probably getting pretty old in running back years. At the very least, we know he's probably dodging a suspension at least this season, right, for his whole aggravated menacing.
It sounds like it won't happen at all. It's not like the Alvin Kamara thing where Kamara was going to. It's just a matter of how long the legal process gets put off. But I don't think anything is going to happen with that Joe Mixon situation.
So, just bring it, just noting it, whatever, again, that nothing's going to happen there. And also we have to keep in mind here that the Bengals, who let Samaje Perine walk, right? He was a viable fantasy backup, a viable starter some weeks, even when Nixon was healthy, Perine had good weeks. So even after Samaje Perine walked, the Bengals still basically gave an ultimatum to Joe Mixon to take a pay cut or get cut, right? They were comfortable, ready to lose him, even though they were also losing Perine here. So how great of a standing is he in over there? Fine. He's still going to contribute. He's still the RB1, right? You can't knock me there. So here comes Chase Brown, right? He's a 23-year-old. He's 5 years in college, right? Got a lot of tread on the tires, you could say, at Illinois, right? He's only got a 5'9", 209-pound frame, and that took 328 carries last year in the Big Ten at Illinois. Here's where I'll say there's actually a little bit of upside there that you could say with that type of volume and that type of experience and the fact that he's taken 600-odd college carries, that he is NFL ready, even despite being 5'9". So you could give him that. Again, no Samaje Perine in the picture here. So it's either a Mixon injury or Samaje Perine could be a 16-team, or I'm not Samaje Perine. Chase Brown could be a 16-team desperation flex. Even in weeks that Mixon is fine. This is a high-powered offense. It's going to score a lot of points. It's probably one of the best offenses in the AFC, if not the best. I assume they'll be neck and neck with the Buffalo Bills offense there. So there's So basically, this is just a whole opportunity situation where you're the backup to an established guy you were ready to move on from, on an offense that's going to be very good in, and a player that maybe doesn't have the crazy highest long-term ceiling, or is he is athletic, right? 4.43 340, above average other combine numbers there. So you have a guy who's physically at least ready for this role. He also has some pass catching upside. Let's remember that. He caught 27 of his 30 targets last year at Illinois, doubled his previous year total at Illinois. So it's a part of his game that he's growing. He clearly worked on to get to the point where he's NFL ready. But basically, this is the kind of running back in a situation where you just need one break. And I don't know if Mixon will play a full 16-game season. You can never really predict that. But Chase Brown at this price is somebody that I'm rounding out my roster with, especially if you took Mixon earlier. You definitely want to make sure you get some Chase Brown.
I'm going to go so far as to say, Jake, that unless you're playing in like an 8-team or 10-team and maybe you go like 14 rounds, we should never talk about Chase Brown at any point during our Tuesday show. And again, for new listeners, Jake and I every Tuesday will be going through all the different waiver wire pickups. Typically, we only focus on people under 40% rostered on Yahoo. That's kind of the threshold. There should never be a point where Chase Brown should be under 40% rostered. Like, I think it's too valuable. Again, we understood this concept when it was Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard and Delvin Cook and Alexander Madison. It's the same exact thing. Samaje Perine played 512 offensive snaps last year when Joe Mixon was on the team. Maybe Chase Brown doesn't quite play that much. Like, I'm not sure he's as good of a pass catcher, as good of as a pass blocker as Samaje Perine was, but he is going to have a role in the offense guaranteed, and that's before factoring in if there's ever a Joe Mixon injury. There's no obvious 1-2 start like, oh yeah, we're going to go ahead and split the workload like the Broncos did post Javonte Williams injury, right? Like it was Melvin Gordon and pieces. It's going to be a guy like Chase Brown who had over 300 carries at the Big Ten level over the past 2 years. We know his body can withstand that. So I love Chase Brown in that capacity. I think it makes a lot of sense, and he'll still have some fantasy utility, especially in deeper leagues, even if Joe Mixon stays healthy the same or throughout the whole season. Yeah. The same concept works for Jerome Ford. So his current ADP is 174, running back 57 in recent NFFC draft. I'm going to be really surprised, Jake, if the Browns, by the end of August 28th or whatever, the end of next month, if Jerome Ford is their running back too. There's too many really good free agent running backs on the waiver wire. But if Ford is available as your running back too for the Browns, I'm gobbling him up everywhere. And I would hope, much like Chase Brown, we will never mention Jerome Ford on the show because he should absolutely be rostered in more than 40% of leagues at the beginning of the season. He is the team's kick returner, which makes me a little bit worried. He was really good in that capacity last season, so there's always room for injury. But I would say if you're going to say, or I would recommend if Jerome Ford is going to be your running back too, they can find kick return production elsewhere. Like if the Browns really are adamant that's the case. And Jerome Ford was really good in college. Like he had 2 years at Alabama where he was behind a bunch of other guys, but did fine enough in his workload. But remember when Cincinnati made the playoffs, they went 13-0. He was the main runner. I think it was 1,500 total yards, 20 touchdowns. He was fantastic. Again, 4.4 speed, much like Chase Brown. I'm shocked that we haven't had more discussion about Jerome Ford. Jim Coventry and I, throughout the entire offseason, have mentioned Chase Brown and Jerome Ford religiously as our late-round sleepers. Clearly no one's listening because they haven't moved up their ADP much at all.
Exactly. It reminds me of the phenomenal baseball feature we have on the Rhett website, Ryan Roof's closer in waiting cheat sheet. This is pretty much the same concept here. If we had a running back closer in waiting cheat sheet, Ford and Chase Brown would be some of the top options on the entire list. And you didn't even you mentioned. I mean, we know Kareem Hunt's gone. We know Dearness Johnson is gone. Right? Is Dominic Felton going to threaten Jerome Ford?
No.
It seems unlikely. So Chubb will be the workhorse. I love Chubb in all drafts here, but go ahead and but he's more than a handcuff, right? I would snipe the Chubb owner around earlier if you have to get a guy like him, and he's a perfect zero RB strategy guy to be scooping up in later rounds.
Well, you heard here on this very fishy X platform that Jake does love Chubb. So good to note, and certainly loves Jerome Ford as well, too. The other running back I want to mention, shockingly, even lower ADP in NFFC formats. Now, to be clear, it's full point PPR, so maybe that factors in. Like if you were to do underdog, I bet you Gus Edwards might be a little bit higher on this one. Running back 62, ADP of 200 even. It's Gus Edwards. And it's the same concept, again, as Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott and Alexander Madison and Dalvin Cook and Eli Mitchell and Christian McCaffrey. Even if Dobbins is healthy, which seems like a big if, because he already had reports that he's going to be on the PUP list to start the training camp. No matter how meaningless that word might mean, that worries me a little bit as somebody that's already invested in Dobbins. Even if Dobbins is healthy, Edwards is going to be involved. Last season, over the final 8 games that he was healthy, 72 carries, 341 rushing yards, 4.7 yards per carry in those games. This isn't like Dobbins where he was shaking off the injury all year. By week 12, when he was good to go, you had Gus Edwards back. And I'm also not buying the concept that the Ravens offense is going to be dramatically different with Todd Monken as your offensive coordinator. Yes, they're going to pass more because they couldn't pass less than what they were doing previously. That was an awful scheme that had Pat Ricard being focused way too much, things like that, triple option, dummy stuff. The offense is going to be better. But I think a better offense helps Dobbins, but also Gus Edwards to a lesser extent. I love the guys that will be immediate running back 1 or 2 flex type guys if the starter were to get hurt, but also still have production even while you're waiting for that to happen. So Chase Brown, Gus Edwards, Jerome Ford, all really fit that mold for me.
And the relatively recent signing of Melvin Gordon doesn't murk anything up for you in that.
Melvin Gordon is washed, and I hate to say that as a UW man myself, but he will not be on the roster, at least, or he'll be like the practice squad bounce up and down.
I wish him the best. I hope he runs for 1,000 yards this year. But anyway, Gus Edwards, he always finds a way to somehow be fantasy relevant, even after starting the season, very injured, right, and coming on late. He, he had a multiple touchdown game in his first game back against the Browns. He's getting a sizable, 16, 11, 16, 13 their games, all different kinds of carries. So any of those points per carry leagues, he's absolutely relevant. Gus Edwards finds a way one way or another every year to work his way into the conversation. So again, it has to be a deep league or an underdog best ball probably, because at ADP 200, you're probably just about filling out the roster in a standard 12 team, and he could easily be someone that we talk about, on the waiver wire show at some point during the year. But I'm fine with that.
I'm loving all the conversation we're getting in the chat right now. Of course, we go live just about every Tuesday at 1 o'clock. We have the Hart Foundation and Uncle Ted Talks, both mentioning Roschon Johnson, the rookie running back out of Texas. For the Bears, of course, they have Khalil Herbert. They signed Deonta Foreman away as well, too. And yet Roschon Johnson I've seen discussed from a number of people as a popular sleeper candidate, too. I took him in our RotoWire Dynasty League, which is not super flex, at the back end of the second round. I'll just say, as a disciple of Mario Puig and John McKechnie, who do a lot of really great college football work for us, they are not nearly as enamored with Roschon Johnson as other people might be. And the track record for John and Mario tends to speak for itself. So when they say, nah, I don't know about Roschon Johnson, I don't think he's going to be it, I tend to agree too.
The other one that I saw in the chat come up was, I'm sorry, I can't scroll back far enough to see who mentioned it, but Malik Davis for the Cowboys.
Yes,
I'm still a little bit concerned that maybe they bring Zeke back or bring somebody back to that offense, so that sours me a little bit on Malik Davis. But right now, I agree that as good as Tony Pollard is, I'm not sure he can handle a Ezekiel Elliott type workload fully on his own. So Malik Davis falls more into that Chase Brown, Jerome Ford category than someone like Roschon or Gus Edwards does for me.
Well, and honestly, I'm not ready to give up the Ronald Jones experience yet. Maybe I should. But he is also in that backfield too.
Melvin who in the chat?
Yeah, Melvin Gordon, Ronald Jones. What is this? 2018? That's a bad joke. But just something to note with Roschon Johnson, who is a very popular candidate for a lot of people when we're talking late round sleepers. So let's get to the receivers before we do so. Word from our sponsors, Fantrax. For you fantasy football players out there, and of course everyone listening should be, is there something you wish your fantasy league had, or features that you're missing from your current leagues? Bonus scoring, custom schedules, or playoffs, deeper team settings? Will look no further, because we have you covered with our friends at Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Create or join a fantasy football commissioner league, invite your friends, and dominate your draft this season. Fantrax is the top dynasty fantasy football platform in the industry. If you're coming from another service, not a problem, because Fantrax can easily import any of your current rosters and leagues and customize if needed. Ever have a trade go wrong or a mistake made during dropping a player? Well, Fantrax Commissioner tools allow you to undo any move with one simple click. If there's anything lacking in your currently fantasy league, Fantrax likely has it. Fantrax is running a special promotion that you won't want to miss. Sign up for free at fantrax.com/RotoWire today to enter for your chance to win tickets to any regular season NFL game for you and your entire league. Plus, you get $6,000 in spending cash. That's right. Tickets for your entire league plus $6,000 in cash. Simply create a new league or bring over your existing leagues for more chances to win. Go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. Our cover boy, at least for this concept, is a wide receiver, and perhaps we are a bit more biased as Packer fans, but I really believe Romeo Doubs is one of the better values right now out there. And he's going, 12th, 13th round ADP. I guess you have the actual numbers.
Yeah, wide receiver 53, 125 overall. So
yeah,
he's somebody that maybe we cheated to bring him in, right? A little bit, because he's probably going in every
Yeah, he's
draft.
not late round.
Yeah, he's not necessarily late round, but still possibly double-digit round, which is late round for some formats. So we're going to cheat and get him in there. He's just an easy cover boy to throw in because I believe, like you do, Joe, that he's being criminally underdrafted at this point in time.
Yeah, it's shocking. Jim Coventry and I had this conversation, a month ago, and Jim's a smart guy, but he was like, "No, I'm not really interested in Romeo Doubs." Like, what do you mean? I understand that if you look at the depth chart today, it's very easy to say, in today's NFL, I want a team's wide receiver 2, even if they're one of the worst passing teams in the league. People are still going to draft Treylon Burks. Now, if they have Hopkins, Burks is probably the wide receiver 2. They're going to run the ball plenty, but they're still going to pass enough. I think you're getting like a 3-round discount on what Romeo Doubs is. Quick poll for you, Jake. This is not on the show notes, so you might be horrendously wrong. That's great. I want horrendously wrong. Who on ESPN scoring, this is 1 point per reception, was wide receiver 30 last year? Or like, can you guess a range of player? Because you could guess. There's a range of player last year that was wide receiver 30.
Range of wide receiver 30, like Smith-Schuster?
Yes. It's so funny. Like, Smith-Schuster and Adam Thielen were 30 and 31. Guys, no, this is not on the notes at all. I'm loving that Jake was like, yeah,
I
range of wide receiver 30.
MVS, but I'm like, no, because I had a lot of Smith-Schuster on my team, and he was just serviceable enough, right? So.
Yes, exactly. So Smith-Schuster's line was more or less 60 catches, about 850 yards, and 5 or 6 touchdowns. That was wide receiver 30. Romeo Doubs in his first 6 games would have put around the same pace as wide receiver 30 if he had played the entire season. Now, this was with Allen Lazard missing some time early in the season. Randall Cobb was out almost immediately. Christian Watson was dropping balls off his head. Like, it was Romeo Doubs as the only target in an Aaron Rodgers-led offense. But tell me how that's much different this year, because Lazard is gone. Randall Cobb is gone. They don't have Robert Tonyan anymore. This is a Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs offense through and through. They drafted Jaden Reed in the 2nd round. Fine. They also have Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, 2 rookie tight ends.
I expect Aaron Jones to catch about 40 balls at least.
Yeah, and we've been saying this for years, right? And Aaron Jones does, but it's not enough. Like, if Doubs merely just plays 16 games this season, I think he walks in to wide receiver 30 numbers. And again, you could plug this in whatever platform you want, but 50 receptions, 800 plus receiving yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns. I think that's today's default in the NFL as a wide receiver 2. And more importantly, I don't think Dontavian Wicks or Samari Touier are really going to be pushing his playing time. I think Doubs and Watson, for better or for worse, are locked in as the team's pass catchers if they're healthy. And I think both are pretty easily projectable figures in an offense that probably would be passing way less.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, worst case scenario, you get a steady 5-10 points every week, which, isn't going to light up the scoreboards, but it'll be stable, right? Because this offense, I mean, listen, the defense should be better in theory, with the bodies and development on that team. But I still see this as a team that's going to have to pass quite a bit. I don't know how much they'll be playing from ahead necessarily. And yeah, it's Watson and it's Doubs and all. If you want to go with the narrative thing, the beat writer camp thing, it's all everything that I've seen, and we consume more Packers talent or content than anybody. It's that Doubs and Love have a ton of chemistry together here. So that's good. You have the track record of what he did during his rookie season. Assume some natural progression. You would assume a little natural regression, without working with Rodgers, but then maybe some positive to bring that back up if he really likes the guy he's working with in Love. So I think we're going to see Doubs outperform his ADP significantly, and I'd be willing to stretch around on him for sure.
Let's also just mention that we have now 2 years of practice time with Jordan Love and Romeo Doubs, because Rodgers wasn't practicing much, if at all, throughout the week. So it was Jordan Love taking the number 1 quarterback snaps and working with the number 1 receivers, which was Doubs for 2.5 months of the season. So I think we're just, a lot of people are wrong about this overall. And I think he's easily a very comfortable wide receiver 4 or 5 for my roster. And it's much more the reason why I want to take a quarterback early on, and I'll get 3 or 4 running backs by round 10, because I know guys like Doubs are later and will be contributors for my fantasy team as it goes. You had the 7th late round flyer type of receiver. It wasn't receiver, 7th overall guy that we listed. It's a cowboy, but it's not Brandon Cooks, who actually I feel like is actually would qualify for me as a sleeper. He's going further than where he should be going. So who are you interested in?
Yeah, maybe I've just been on this guy's hype train ever since he came out his second year in the league and had 1,100 yards. But I'm going back to Michael Gallup, and he is way down the list. He's wide receiver 64, ADP 170. And this is, of course, the theme of this show is long shots here. He's the guy I took right towards the end of Fishbowl. He might even be free in drafts, because a lot of people think Cooks is going to be wide receiver 2 behind CeeDee Lamb, right? But I'm going to take Gallup because first I'm going to take the guy who has 5 years, around 60-ish games with Dak, as opposed to a complete newcomer in Cooks, a newcomer that is going to be 30 in September and has been traded 4 times in his career, right? A couple times, maybe. This many times, something just isn't quite fitting there. So, maybe it's circumstantial. I guess we'll see. But anyway, Gallup already has the chemistry established. He doesn't have to come in and work to make that happen, right? Gallup is 27 years old, and he might finally be healthy. Remember, last year he was coming back really only after 8 months from an ACL injury and never quite got into gear. Now, he did have a little bit of off-season surgery, arthroscopic ankle knee cleanups. Far simpler. He, at least in his words, is saying that he's healthy and ready to go. And I think a fully healthy Gallup can be, especially with defenses all over CeeDee Lamb, a fully healthy Gallup can absolutely, could get back to that 1,100-yard type of production here for a price that's way, way down here. Now, of course, I always want to present the other side of the argument, right? And it is that Brian Schottenheimer is in now and Kellen Moore is out. And that change alone should mean more of a run-focused offense, right? In theory, I'm calling that right. But, assuming they don't find a way to re-sign Zeke, this kind of goes back to the Malik Davis argument we were discussing, like how much is Tony Pollard really going to handle? They're going to have to pass the ball a little bit more than Schottenheimer maybe wants to necessarily here. So
and McCarthy, right? There's quotes
exactly.
that McCarthy want to be run-oriented too. For what it's worth, I think the Zeke thing makes a big difference that he's not back from pass blocking part of things. We don't know. I mean, I don't think Ronald Jones or Malik Davis are nearly as suited, although nobody was. Zeke was one of the best in terms of pass blocking.
Zeke's just a big body. He's strong.
Yeah, and he wasn't afraid to go get the block. Not that other running backs are, but you could just see it. Mm-hmm. He was also good in the red zone. For as much as you want to talk about his yards per carry being bad, Ezekiel Elliott, he was a good red zone target, a good guy that could find his way into the end zone. That has value in the league. It also, by the way, lowers your yards per carry. Like your figures look worse when you're getting multi-1-yard carries. You literally can't go further than 1 yard, so it hurts your yards per carry. So I actually think you look at the targets in the Cowboys, if they were to score more, their offense is still going to be as good. Is it Tony Pollard getting those? Well, maybe. I guess he could. Malik Davis, Ronald Jones? I don't know. I don't think so. CeeDee Lamb's a really good receiver. He probably has room to grow as a red zone specialist. Brandon Cooks does not. That's not what Brandon Cooks. I think Michael Gallup actually has a very confident and relative role as one of their best red zone threats. And if you assume the Cowboys offense will be good, that's where you and I differ. I don't.
Yeah.
Then Michael Gallup will begin that.
Yeah, to me, Gallup was just on a career trajectory that he was going to be a breakout premier fantasy asset. And then he had some Dak injuries, and then he had some injuries of itself. I think if it comes all together, he can still be that 1,100-yard guy.
Yeah, and the other part of this, Noah Brown last year, who was really at times the team's number 3 receiver, 43 receptions, 555 yards. I think Michael Gallup's a significantly better player than Noah Brown, and theoretically Brandon Cooks and CeeDee Lamb will take more of the opportunities away, but
they still have a third rounder in Jalen Tolbert around.
Who was almost immediately disappointing in camp last year, but that's a good point that he
caught
was
2 passes all of last year. So even though he's got that 3rd-round pick tag, why do you throw him out there when you have an experienced guy like Gallup available?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Are you cool to transition to the tight ends?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to do those quickly too.
Okay. Well, I guess I would say I like Irv Smith a lot. We've mentioned it on past podcasts. Again, if you've been listening throughout the offseason, I was saying that's one of my favorite ones. I will be structuring my lineup for the most part to fade tight ends. I'm not taking the Evan Ingrams of the world. I'm not going to be going ahead and getting Pat Freiermuth very often. Definitely not in on Chigi Okonkwo after the DeAndre Hopkins signing. So these tight ends are all ones that I'm targeting that we're going to mention here as possible starters. And that's how confident I feel in Irv Smith. Mm-hmm. Hayden Hurst at times last year was the Bengals' 3rd target. We've had people in the chat say they're going to have 3 1,000-yard receivers. Higgins is good. Jamar Chase is really good. Not confident Tyler Boyd's going to get all that workload. And I think Irv Smith, when he was healthy for the Vikings, wasn't just a run blocker. He was a very good intermediate catcher too. So I think Irv Smith, from a touchdown perspective, for the yardage that he could pile up as a tight end too, a guy that you could kind of say, all right, I'm going to get 8-10 points out of. I love this year in a Bengals offense that's going to be really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have nothing to dispute that. I look at that tight end depth chart over there. There isn't much behind him that's going to be a threat. He's someone that, again, has gotten a lot of hype in the past, then gets one injury, and all of a sudden, ooh, where did all that hype go? He's had mild little bits. I mean, bits of success in the league before. In 2020, he scored 5 touchdowns, and we all thought the breakout season was coming, right? And then and then the injuries hit. But he's a guy who is 24 years old, 6'2", 240, should be able to hold up. I'm with you there on him.
The other one, well, I guess it's twofold. I'm in on a number of rookie tight ends who have been in more prominent roles than we've seen in quite some time. Like we had Kyle Pitts, generational tight end, rookie guy who's going to start immediately. OJ Howard, I think synonymously the same thing, going to be generational, will start immediately. It doesn't happen all that often that we're going to see as many rookie tight ends relevant this year as we will. Sam LaPorta is the first one, obviously one of the first picks in the second round. Lions trade away TJ Hawkinson at the trade deadline last year, have almost nothing to replace him. Sam LaPorta walks in immediately as a starter for the team. Dalton Kincaid, we'll talk about in a second. I'll let you do your LaPorta thing because I'm with you on it.
So I don't even want to take credit for this LaPorta thing because as podcasters, right, we consume tons of fantasy content from all over the place, right? And I don't think I can really say this any better than how Yahoo's Andy Barron said it to Jim Coventry at the Fantasy Football Expo. I think it was this past weekend or a weekend before that. So I'm going to pull this right from there. I know that's a little lazy, but the point was excellent that LaPorta for the Lions just has so much opportunity, right? We talk about, it being a mix of skill and opportunity, and I'm generally pretty rookie averse, but in these drafts, if I get past Evan Ingram, I think Evan Ingram's maybe the last one I'm slightly comfortable taking. Otherwise, you're looking at a complete crapshoot tight end 9 through 25, right? So anyway, they pointed out that LaPorta, that the Lions in general, that over that first stretch of the season between, I think it was Hawkinson and Zylstra, they threw 12 touchdowns to their tight end position combined. I mean, there was, and granted, a lot of this was no names that nobody was going to start in fantasy.
Brock Wright, that was another one too.
Exactly, but this system does throw to the tight ends. Then you look at the old wide receiver depth chart over here. Jamison Williams, he's going to miss some time. Marvin Jones is currently, he's back there, by the way, back with the Lions, currently on the non-football injury list for unspecified reasons.
He's a veteran. He can. That's his unspecified reason.
Yeah, I guess so. But anyway, it is just Amon-Ra St. Brown and Brock Wright, if you will. If LaPorta can block well enough to get in that lineup, he'll be fine. If he can't, you can cut him before week 1 anyway because he's a tight end too, right, that you don't really need on your roster for the most part. So, thanks to Jim and Andy for leading me on to that one. And, sometimes you just got to give credit because I think that argument is pretty airtight.
Well, and I'll go one step further. Mario Puig has been talking about Sam LaPorta before he was even drafted by the Lions and saying he has George Kittle-esque ability after the catch. And I think that's the really key part of this because if you're saying LaPorta and Amon-Ra St. Brown will continue to get targets in the middle of the field, well, it's going to be St. Brown, right? Like if you can only have one target in the middle of the field, fine. But LaPorta is a field stretcher. Think Robert Tonyan peak year with the Packers where he's running down the middle of the field and cover 2 defenses and making the safety have to make a decision. Like LaPorta can do that. He can also split out wide and do some things after the catch. Like I think he is a all-around tremendous target. And looking at that offense right now, which we still expect to be pass heavy, Jared Goff is being drafted among the top 18 quarterbacks this year. LaPorta is going to have to be a factor if people believe the Lions will be as good as they will this year. And I kind of tend to think at the very least, it won't be LaPorta's fault. Like he's going to be a factor offensively. I mentioned Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah. I was going to say that in Tight End University, right? Iowa.
Yes. The other part of that too, where the Kittle factor comes in. There was reports early on, obviously the first round tight end in Dalton Kincaid was going to be a slot receiver for the Bills. And I kind of am intrigued by that idea. Now, the only reason you're doing that is if you want your run offense to be better. Like why are you putting out a 6'4" guy at 250 pounds at slot receiver unless you want to block better? But I think the Bills do want to run more. I mean, that's been an issue for them over past seasons is that they can get out to these great leagues. Think about the Packers game last year. They couldn't put it away because they couldn't run the ball. Maybe it's the offensive line. Maybe it's because guys like Devin Singletary are carrying the ball. But I think having better personnel is a factor too. I actually expect Dalton Kincaid to be a slot target for them this season. I don't mind where his price tag is right now as a tight end 15. Going deeper, and I'm thinking like not even underdog best balls, but even deeper than that, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, one of them is going to be a relevant rookie tight end for the Packers this season. It's just a matter of guessing which one's correct. Michael Mayer for the Raiders, can he beat out Austin Hooper? Jake, you might be able to beat out Austin Hooper at this point in your respective careers.
I don't know my 6-second flat floor.
You're not going to be expected to do much more. Austin Hooper can't run that much faster. I think Michael Mayer is an interesting target as well. And we've had in the chat.
Uncle Ted, he brings up. I like the point that he brings up. Dawson Knox. Rookie tight ends. You have your issues, right? I'd take LaPorta over Kincaid personally, and I don't know if
most people are.
That's that hot of a take there. But Kincaid has Knox, who they paid, and who is an effective red zone target already here now.
But if you're using Kincaid as a slot receiver, you can also have Dawson Knox out there.
I just don't necessarily see how that's going to happen when you've already got Diggs and Davis, and I think Khalil Shakir could have easily made the wide receiver long tosses at the end there. I don't know about two tight ends in the offense here, but
I'm not ruling it out. I guess I'm not ruling that one out. I like Kincaid relative to his value, and I don't think Dawson Knox is anything more than a red zone threat, so that's fine, big contract or not. We also had in the chat, people mentioned Luke Schoonmaker. I'm going to say right now, no. I think that actually is a horrible late round pick. And again, I do the NFFC 30-round best ball every single year. I got Daniel Bellinger in round 27 in that draft because no one knew who the Giants starting tight end was going to be, and it wasn't going to be I'm even blanking who it was at the time. So fine. You could probably get Schoonmaker in round 27 in the NFFC best ball draft like that. You might be able to do that. Jake Ferguson is a good tight end, like Owen Daniels level good. There's nothing more confident from a UW fan perspective.
Hall of Fame level there. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'll be the first to admit when I don't know enough about a situation to give a valid opinion here. I have zero opinion on Schoonmaker or whatever.
I can tell you because I wrote his note actually on the RotoWire site while the draft was going on. Mm-hmm. Blocking heavy guy, bigger body. It's more like he's fine, but Jake Ferguson's really good. So is Peyton Hendershot, who actually had some snaps and opportunities. We talked about him on a few podcasts late last year as a guy that was getting some red zone touchdowns. And they had schemed some plays for him. You know how we had the Greg Dulcich, Alberto Quegmanum thing last year? I think we're all getting it wrong with Schoonmaker just because he's a sexy third-round pick. It's Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot that are going to make up for Dalton Schultz and him signing with the Texans.
I think Dulcich will be fine for some games, not all games. I think Cheegy will be fine for some games, not all games. Of course, DeAndre Hopkins really, that kind of brings him down with the available targets there. And I will note that I did take Matthew Mayer in round 17 of the Fishbowl as my tight end 3. He doesn't need to go off the board in 12-team redraft leagues.
Right. And, okay, great. Michael Mayer's slow, right? That was the knock on him. He ran a slow 40. Mm-hmm. So is Mark Andrews. And I'm not saying Mark Andrews and Michael Mayer are going to have the same role offensively, but Mayer was widely touted as one of the best tight end prospects in some time. I guess not Kyle Pitts, but after Kyle Pitts, right? Like a better Kyle Rudolph, which was a first-round pick many years ago. I don't mind that Michael Mayer thing, even though I'm lower on him than Musgrave and LaPorta and Kincaid. Like I think he's pretty low in my rookie tight end rankings, but it goes to show just how deep that position is. And I think especially after really the Evan Ingram, Pat Freiermuth, Chige Okonkwo range, you can pick whoever you want that's going to finish as a low on tight end 1, and you might be right. And I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to probably spread my shares out pretty significantly to try and guess which one it is. But we're going to have lots of conversations, Jake, throughout the season as to who fits into these tight end categories, and excited to dive into that more with you. Before we hit the end of the show, is there anything you want to talk about the app or podcast, sponsorships?
I mean, for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to continue to mention our most easy, convenient product that we can offer. The cheat code, I'll continue to say, the cheat code to get in the full RotoWire football package in a way. Again, it's just draft season stuff. But the cheat code to get in a whole bunch of our content for $8 is the 2023 RotoWire Fantasy Football Draft Kit on iOS devices. Here you can manage as many leagues as you need to. You put all of your custom settings in, get custom auction values, custom rankings, run mock drafts with the app. $8 in the iOS App Store there, in the Apple App Store. So give it a run for your iPhone or iPad. It's especially if you don't want to lug a computer to draft day. the dang magazine you were going to buy cost $8 anyway, right? And then this app comes in, and you can download player data right before your draft, get all the latest injury detail information, all the latest news on your players. There'll be a full outlook for every fantasy relevant player on there, and a bunch of our articles sneak in there too, as well as a few other features, odds and ends. So $8, man, it's a cheat code. Go ahead and get that. Of course, we'd love for you to subscribe to the full RotoWire website and continue to get assistance from us throughout the entirety of the fantasy football season here. But if you just need a hand with your draft, if you're coming in cold and need a custom list, even if your league is even the slightest different scoring settings, people ask what's the number one thing in fantasy that you can, the number one bit of advice, I'd say know your league scoring setting and draft off a list that is based on your league scoring setting. Because, the simplest example is PPR versus non-PPR, but I see people throwing in points per rush, points per completion, first downs, wacky defense scoring, the difference between 2 wide receivers and 3 wide receivers or multiple flexes. All that is huge, and the app's going to help you figure all of that out. So rant over, $8, cheat code, go ahead and get the app. It's the 2023 RotoWire Fantasy Football Draft Kit app that is for iOS devices.
The Hart Foundation said in the chat, so I'll parrot him. This is relative to Taysom Hill when he was a quarterback listed as a tight end cheat code. That's how important the RotoWire app is right now,
yes, exactly.
And what it could be. So
it's the Taysom Hill of fantasy sports apps.
All right, that does it for us on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. We'll be back again next Tuesday, getting you set. Happy training camp to everyone. Stay safe, and be in touch again a little bit while here.